Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And it's more
Is that the local one?
Wouldn't that be?
One across from your house is torn down.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I think I saw you.
Yeah.
How are you doing? I like that shirt. No. I hate to see you, Jimmy Ramsey. You can be lobster. You can catch your camera. So he is on the side.
All right, this time we're gonna call this committee meeting to order. This is a committee meeting by the Public Safety Committee, which is made up of myself, Warren Bridges, Pat Fields, and Zach Lumpkin. We do have Commissioner Toby and Commissioner Khan here also. There,
The mayor says she's on her way back, safe hill as fast as she can, and want to apologize for not being here. She said.
oh, okay, all right, so the mayor is in route. All right, great. All right. And so, obviously, the issue and the purpose of this committee meeting is to get a report of our police department. That was we had an in-depth report or survey of the police department done by Mr. Dixon, and I read it, and certainly interested in hearing some discussions about what's in the report. I'm sure that my colleagues also reviewed the report, and I noticed that there is a lot of folk here, and y'all probably haven't been here too often where I have been running the committee meetings, but I will tell you, I will not have any mess in this committee meeting. I would ask that it's not called from, if you're not saying anything. I would ask that Mr. Vincent start out by giving us a summary, and I hope that he can keep it within about 15 minutes max. And then we will certainly go around to committee members and others that have questions or want to make comments. So at this time, first of all, I want to thank you for your work. It's pretty extensive. I'm just opening the floor to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. I hope to read out some comments by way of making a summary. If you feel like I haven't made the sufficient summary at the end, then please ask questions. You have a copy. First of all, this is everybody's problem. What's contained in this report is not any one person or one group's problem. It belongs to all of us. Every one of us in this room today, and I'm inviting all of you to become part of the solution. All of you in this room. The first invitation I'm going to offer is to our elected officials and to our city managers, both current and future, with all apologies. You have read the report and now have a simple choice. You either believe it or you don't. If you don't believe it, and that choice is yours, I invite you to repeat the process and execute a review for yourselves. If you believe it, then you have a second choice. Do something concrete about it, or do nothing. I naturally recommend and encourage you to take action, starting today. The second invitation is to everybody else sitting around the room. I realize that you have not read the report, and I'm not going to go through the contents in detail today, or I would overrun my 15 minutes. It may be a disappointment to find that it doesn't actually contain much that will be a surprise to you. The issues that OPD is facing are not new. They go back a long, long way. Most of it has been spoken or written about on prior occasions. The depth to which we are behind the eight ball may come as a surprise, but the issues themselves are not new. The report does, however, cover 12 main areas that need to be addressed, ranging from compensation and benefits, through to the equipment that is required for the police to do their job, and to the building itself. Under those 12 topics, I further identify 41 specific action areas that need to be attended to. The challenge for the rest of us is, once again, in two parts. The first part of the challenge is to read the report and ask probing questions if there are things that are unclear. I'm happy to hold a question and answer session sometime next week and answer any questions about the report itself. The second part of your challenge is to develop a mechanism to hold our elected officials and city managers accountable for putting in place a plan and resources for resolving the identified issues. When I started on this review and I asked around, many people reported that the OPD had once been a shining example. That was repeated to me in many of the interviews. I asked what would have to happen to get back to those days. The answers I received were pretty unanimous. Pay us what we need for a decent living and treat us with respect. Pay and support came out as the two biggest issues. There are many others, but those were the two that came up again and again. Let's look at the first of these issues, salary. In the report, you will see it headed as compensation and benefits. I understand that some of the direct salary issues have been dealt with. Thank you. I'm also led to believe that that act alone has had a positive impact on recruitment. That's great news. I'm not sure whether the other issues associated with salary have been addressed. I do understand that a citywide salary study is currently underway. That is also great news. It's especially great news if it is robust, transparently executed, includes a role analysis, job leveling, compression analysis, involves interviews with all departments, outlines the methodology of the analysis, and is open and available for public review. This will put it in contrast with prior studies which were held behind closed doors. Some examples of other issues that arose in connection with salary are the reinstatement of the career ladder, the resolution of the issues involved with salary increases upon promotion, resolution of the restrictions on the professional pay plan, and the resolution of the highest grading in performance reviews. The last regime had a review scale of 1 to 4, but no one was allowed to receive a 4, even if they had perfect performance. I do not propose to go into each of those in detail, but will expand upon one of them by way of example. The professional pay plan. On the face of it, it looked like a good plan. Percentage pay increases for certain qualifications and certificates. Like many things in life, however, the devil was in the details. You only got the increases if you applied, were approved, and were successful while you were employed in the department. If you were an existing employee, your qualifications didn't count. So it's not a useful retention tool. If you had the qualifications before joining, they didn't count either. So it wasn't a useful recruitment tool. Those are all issues concerning salary. What about support? I think the turnout here today gives you a good indication of how the town feels about police support. I asked one of the ex-officers that I interviewed, what it would take to persuade him to come back and work here again. He stated that it would never happen. His words, here, where he is now, I know that I have the support of the mayor, the town council, the city manager, and the assistant city manager. And they all come for ride-alongs. How can they, the officials, make judgment calls on our job if they don't actually know what we do? We need to demonstrate our support by actions, not words. It amazes me that we can celebrate the best yards of the month, but cannot show up and say thank you on Police Appreciation Day. January the 9th, by the way, mark your calendars. Moving on to the other, more direct part of support, fiscal policy. A well-known politician in the 19th century said that politics is simple. It's the balance between economics and social justice. I think that over the past 5 years or so, we've lost that balance. There's been a focus on short-term economics and less attention given to the social justice aspects. This needs to be readdressed. I was once given a great lesson in finance by one of my chief financial officers. Take a look at your depreciation numbers. If you're not reinvesting at least at that rate, then you are falling behind. We have fallen way behind in our investments in the police department. This lack of investment manifests particularly in the areas of equipment and technology. Let me give you a few examples. Computers. The cars are equipped with laptop computers. Pretty much makes sense these days, don't you think? Except for the fact that the laptops in question are pretty much the same ones that you or I can buy from Best Buy or Office Depot. They're not the rugged tough books that most agencies have, because they cost more money. They were cheaper. The problem with that is that they fall apart 5 times faster than the tougher versions. Another problem, they don't come equipped with backlit keyboards. The answer that was proposed? Buy those little battery-driven clip-on lights. We could go on to discuss the pros and cons of having offices in a car lit up from within, but I'll leave that to your imagination. What about the desktop computers? Most of them are way out of date, with some of them running 2010 versions of Windows. So what, you might ask? Well, first of all, Microsoft doesn't support 13-year-old software. Second is the impact of running old software. Other application software does not run well. In many instances, the software used for entering police reports only runs in a tiny portion of the screen. I could go on. Body cameras, video storage, riot gear, evidence tracking. Senate Bill 300 mandated the use of certain software. At the time of this report, the budget for that had not been approved. Some of what is required is at a level of detail that this committee and the Board of Commissioners does not need to be involved in. What is needed, however, is the recognition that there is a need to reinvest in order to bring us up to date. The sad thing is, it's not a huge investment. Certainly upwards of $1 million, but I would argue the alternative is not acceptable. I chose the title, The Department and City in Crisis, because I wanted to grab everyone's attention. I could easily have called it a blueprint for the future. It would have been a nice play on words. The contents are a mixture of statements about where we are today, what needs to change for the future, and what steps we need to take in order to move from A to B. Those 3 things are all part of a good strategic plan. Another component of a good plan is is an analysis of what led us to this point, so that we don't repeat past mistakes. Unfortunately, all of those things are necessary, but they're not sufficient. There are many great strategic plans that have fallen by the wayside and have never been implemented. Two other components are required. The first is committed leadership. A plan doesn't implement itself. It needs both explicit leadership and a powerful coalition of support to make it happen. In addition, the second thing it needs is for leadership to have the courage to say that we don't have the skill sets to do everything that's required, and to bring in temporary extra help by way of support. For those of you that have not yet had the opportunity to read the report, in addition to reaching your own conclusions as to what needs to be done, you might also reach the conclusion that I'm less than objective in my commentary. It was pointed out to me that I was taking a position of advocacy. Guilty as charged. I was probably biased from the outset, as my father was a policeman, a London bobby, for 28 years. I experienced the negative effects of the law enforcement world of shift work, low pay, and high stress on the family. My experience, however, in doing these types of investigations indicated that in most cases, these issues are rarely unidimensional. There are normally many things that combine together to form an overall context. I started this investigation by putting my biases to one side and basing my review of questions on a standard model for categorizing these different dimensions. How does the external environment impact the situation? What impact do systems and structures have and processes have? Are the duties, skill sets, and people appropriate for the task at hand? What impact does the internal environment have on the issues? In this instance, I added another bucket: facilities, equipment, and technology. The majority of the content of the report is directly based upon what was told to me in as close to the exact words as I could get. I then sorted them into the 12 main areas I mentioned earlier, driven by those 6 typical buckets. In some cases, I interpolated several comments. In some cases, I did some external research. Looking ahead, if you choose to take concrete action, how will we measure the success of any of these initiatives? I have a modest proposal for your consideration in 4 parts. Part 1 is that by the end of calendar year 2023, each of the 41 areas requiring action has either been resolved or a plan is in place for its resolution. Part 2 is that funds have been allocated for the resolution of those 41 action items. Part 3 is that investment funds have been allocated to equipment and technology to bring us up to date and safe. Part 4 is to carry out a follow-up review 1 year from this review to see what progress has been made and report back to the board and the public. In closing, I'd like to read from the first paragraph of the report. During the time in my police department, I've listened a lot and learned a lot. I learned about their lives, their jobs, their concerns, their frustrations, their dreams and ambitions, their families, their loyalty to their brotherhood and to the city of Oxford. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone in that department for their hospitality, their willingness to be candid and share that candor, their willingness to open up and place their trust and faith in me, and their ever-present humor. Above all, I wish to say thank you to each and every one of you for your service and your willingness to place our safety ahead of your own comfort and safety. Thank you. I welcome any questions.
All right, so what I would like to do, Manager Harold, if you want to make some comments at this time, you can, or we can go to committee members to see if they have.
I think you should go to committee members and ask.
All right. Commissioner Lumpkin and or Commissioner Fields, anything y'all would like to say in response, in terms of your review?
plan of action that is, can be, is that gonna be made available to us and then we can have it, I think get it all down on the next. Cause I think we definitely need to come up with some kind of strategy that we have. Please,
So the last page. I'm sorry, I didn't have time to bring, I was writing this until 10 minutes before we left, so I didn't have a chance to make copies.
anything, probably, but. Mr. Fields?
Somewhere in the study, it was quite a bit to read, I read that you said that some of the officers had been prior informed as to your coming, by board members that was gonna be a witch hunt. So do you think we really got your honest comments and opinions after that having been said?
It was a concern of mine that maybe the pool well had been poisoned, but that resolved within probably 10 minutes of my first interview. The amount of candor and the directness of it, I believe we got to the issues at heart.
So, I'm gonna certainly ask some questions, but I wanted to give Commissioner Toby and Commissioner Khan an opportunity to ask any questions that y'all might have.
I'd just like to, make a little brief statement. I mean, I've read the report. And I'm gonna quote from, page 13, 2B. So to a person, everyone interviewed commented on the lack of support across the street, which is this building. That manifests itself at 4 levels, namely the city manager, the board of commissioners in totality, and the personnel and public safety subcommittees level. The mayor and human resources perceive lack of support ranges from a feeling of neglect. That's just part of that statement. And I've got to say, I agree with every word. I think in the past, we have neglected our people. I don't know why. And I've been behind them every step of the way since I've been in commissioner. Thankfully, at last, we started on the road to recovery. And I just want to thank you. But it's every word is true. I mean, this is a damning report on the city, on the commissioners, on the board. And I thank you for it. I thank you. I mean, honestly, we need it. Bad times someone stood up and was honest. And we've got to accept that responsibility.
Sure. So, for starters, I think in terms of addressing all the points Mr. Dixon gave us are very doable, right? Equipment, we've begun addressing pay. What I would like to understand, I think some of the broader things that we probably want to look at is people capital, right? So one of the underlying things that I've noticed in my time here is the lack of investment in people. I'm not talking about just pay. I'm talking about a culture. I'm talking about how we resolve disputes, how we communicate interdepartmentally. So this seems to be as good an opportunity to begin to focus on some of those pieces, right? Not having equipment is certainly frustrating. We can get equipment, but how do we heal the wounds and how do we move forward investing in our people, investing in a culture for this broader organization? And obviously that goes beyond just the police department. It's everything. So I think we need to look internally and figure out how we can begin that investment in our culture so that we can better serve the citizens. So I think this sparks a really interesting question that we ought to take to heart as we move forward with addressing the physical capital pieces, right? I mean, we can get money to replace equipment. We can fix those things, but we have to make sure that we fix the culture around it so that team members across the entire city feel that they can advocate, that they can communicate, and we have a more positive culture overall.
know, what I would say to the report is, you know, I think it was a needed, effort to get a view of what is going on or what is happening with our police department. I would say, though, our police department has the highest budget of all of our departments in the city, the highest budget. And as commissioners, what we do is we hear from department heads about what's going on in their departments. And I know that I'm sure that my colleagues, we vote and support those things that are brought to our attention by department heads in terms of what's going on. And although I read this report and I understand many of the issues that were brought up in it, I think that it's sort of like, you know, all of a sudden, you know, so much is wrong. And I'm saying to you that there are years and years, we got commissioners that weren't even around here when some of these things occurred, and we were voting on different things. And I would just make the comment that we depend on our department heads, we depend on our managers to be upfront with us about what's going on. I had no idea of how old the computers were on the desks at the police department. I mean, but that's something that should be brought to our attention by the head of the police department. And I'm not just talking about the present police chief. We've had, you know, since I've been on the board and off the board and then back on the board, probably had about 4 or 5 police chiefs. But the point I'm trying to make is the obligation also is on our department heads and on our management to bring to our attention what the needs are. Because I've been in meetings where we award police officers, it seemed like almost every other week had police officers in our board meeting and we were congratulating them on the work that they are doing and how proud we are of their bravery and many other things. I mean, to hear that the police department doesn't feel that they get support from commissioners is a little bit surprising to me from the standpoint of what I have seen and the reports we have received. Crime rates going down. Every time there was a presentation by the police chief, it was crime rate is going down. Things are going well in the police department. And on top of that, we have had companies to come in and evaluate our police department. And we got reports from that agency that reviewed our police department and told us as commissioners that we have a top-rated police department and that they are doing very well based on, you know, what they have. So what I'm saying to you is that reports that we have gotten as commissioners, and you can go back and review the meetings, have 9 times out of 10 been very positive reports from our law enforcement. You know, this will just make us focus in on issues that, you know, we want to address, and I would invite anybody to review any meetings we've had and what commissioners support the police department and any day. There may be some commissioners that are not on the board now who may have given some difficulty to our police department, but I would say that in general, this board of commissioners have been very supportive of our police department, and we want to see good things happen, but we get good reports. and have gotten good reports at our meetings about our police department. So some of this is very surprising to me. I'm glad that we are taking steps in terms of increasing, starting salaries. We've taken steps to, give, loyalty bonuses. We, are trying to implement merit pay. We extended the radius for take-home cars. We're taking steps to deal with the issue of recruiting and retention. Um, you know, things take time. And I think that things that have been brought to this board's attention recently, we have tried to address it. And you know, to get $4,000 and $5,000 raises is a big step. And to increase the amount by $3,000 to $4,000 of starting salaries for police officers is taking steps. We are not a board that's not trying to address the issues in the police department. And remember, we got a lot of other departments. And I know we've talked about signing bonuses, we've talked about moving expenses, assistance, we've talked about housing assistance. I mean, these are things that we as a board have been trying to do and have done. So when I read in a report that there's officers that question our city attorney because he also practices in private practice, and they wonder if he's got their interest in mind. I mean, that's craziness. Tom Burnett has been our city attorney for 20, 30 years, I don't know. And I've never heard an issue raised about what he does as a city attorney and what he does in court. I practice law and represent defendants. I dare one officer to stand up and say that they've ever had any problems with being in court in handling my cases and their jobs as police officers. I never take into consideration, you know, their jobs and what I have to do in my profession. In fact, I think it makes me more sensitive to some of the issues that they have to address. So, and then, you know, there are folks that are not here that were in this report. Our mayor and our former city manager, where police officers are saying that they didn't feel like they got the full support of them. They need to address, I guess, whether or not they have been fully supported in this police department. Now, I'm saying all these things, also keeping in mind that we do need to look very closely at this, and we do need to take steps to bring our police department up to snuff. Because the bottom line is we're growing and we have to have law enforcement protection. I agree with some of the stuff in here, but there are some things that I do not believe.
I have a question for Phil. So how much of, I know it's not all of this, but did you see some problems exacerbated by faulty communication? We need to find ways to improve communication between City Hall, Board of Commissioners, and the police department, because some of the stuff in here, I mean, to me, it just seemed like opinions were formed based on a lack of communication or faulty information, and maybe some personal opinion. I don't know. Did you see anything like that, where communication may exacerbate some of this stuff?
Is that the question?
Yes.
Did I see any? Some, not a huge amount. I think having done probably 50 of these, communication always comes as the boulder that everyone wants to hide behind. You have to dig deeper to find out what is it. Sometimes it's miscommunication, sometimes it's lack of communication, sometimes it's deliberate obfuscation, sorry. I didn't go into that level of detail to find out what it was. My job was to interview the police and the police officers and report back what they believed to be.
I was listening to Commissioner Bridges. I've heard some of the old police reports. The police reports that we heard before I was commissioner, but I was sitting in the audience. They gave a good report, the police. They gave a good report, but they were reporting on the work the police was doing. I don't think it reported on the stress they were going through because they were underfunded or undernumbered. The officers that were reported on were doing a great job with what they were given, fantastic job for what they were given. I just think that why did we have to wait till we get to a crisis situation before we actually looked at it seriously? And the same thing's happening in other departments. Why do we have to wait that long? We should be listening.
Yeah, my own, as far as today, as a commissioner, if you have somebody evaluating police department and you hear that things are going well and you don't care about some other issues that could affect the performance, it affects what you do as a commissioner. I've never heard anything about problems with computers until I read this. Not from one police chief. You know, and so that, the point I'm trying to make is that if you're gonna have problems, you need to bring it to the board's attention. And don't, you know, have someone do an evaluation and then, you know, dump it on us like this. What irks me a little bit is that I have been in, and we can go back and review our city council meetings. This city council continuously gave awards, acknowledged police officers, and talked about how we were proud of what they were doing. Continuously. And not in one of those meetings that I hear from a police chief, well, we need computers and our equipment is failing, and so you know, we need some funding for that. Not once. And we can go back and listen to the recording. So I'm just saying, this is fine, but you know, I want the department heads to come talk to us, you know, before we get to this.
So, couple things. One, with respect to how I interpret the report, it's a very raw report. There's nothing wrong with that. Perception is 9 cents of reality. You can't help how any individual community feels. As a member of this board, it's easy to take a step back and go, wow, you know, that's, if you're point, as a board, we do a lot of things to support department heads. As we are informed of needs, we appropriate funds, we do the things that they're asked of the board. That's doing how things go. But again, perception is 9 cents of reality. So I don't take personal the items that are in there with respect to we don't listen or we don't hear. What I try to understand from this report is I hear you, I get it, there's pain, but my take on it again is there is a broader culture issue. And how we address that is critically important. Again, we have technology issues as we've acknowledged in other meetings. I mean, I haven't had functional email in a number of weeks because we have old equipment that we haven't invested in. We know there are issues there, but those are monetary problems. We can fix those. We can look at them. We can take the recommendations of staff and move forward. I'm not going to beat up or bash previous city administration, but I go to my colleagues in October that we have a problem in how we handle our personnel. It's clear. And we need to be forward thinking in how we address that. We need to be purposeful in how we address that. And it's going to take a collective. There is no easy answer. How we're going to address it, but we need to acknowledge it, I think, and say, okay, we hear you, we see you, we feel you. How do we move forward? How do we begin to heal those wounds and those opinions and move forward? I don't want to get into a back and forth of what we did or didn't do in previous meetings and a finger pointing game of I got you. What I want is to be able to support the police department and any other department. I'd love to have my email fixed. To address it, and then come up with a comprehensive plan of how we're going to measure. And this is something I've said in repeated meetings. We can't manage what we cannot measure. So we have to find a way to be able to manage the well-being of the entire city organization. Are we being communicated with appropriately? Are we getting information? Or is there a culture that is preventing that communication from reaching the board? Or a perceived culture that is preventing that information from bubbling up to the board? If we don't know, we can't fix. And we absolutely depend on the department heads to advocate for the needs, something I've said repeatedly. None of us are subject matter experts in any of the fields that they operate in. But we have to make sure that there is a clear line of communication from those department heads through the city manager that we can interpret and take action on. And building some framework around that accountability, whatever this practice needs to be, I think, a critical next step as I see it. So I'd love to see city staff focus on what we're going to do to get there, and then measure ourselves against it. As Phil said in the report, I think not only going back and making sure that, okay, do we have the physical equipment that we need for the police department, really for every department, but are we taking care of the social capital of people? Are we getting the information that we need? Do we have a positive culture, a good work environment in order for us to operate effectively? And I think that's something to measure ourselves against. And that's, I think normal for a lot of organizations to be able to do that. Self-reflection is always important. So, I'd love for us, as a takeaway from this, again, building those roadmaps.
Mr. Bridges, my shock was that when I was, as you were speaking about equipment, in my tenure on the board, I've heard nothing about the gas mask or where they're getting it from. I've heard nothing of it. I was shocked at the equipment. But as Commissioner Bridges said, if we don't know it's broken, we don't know to fix it. Two part. All of this is pointing the fingers at the board and the mayor and the manager. But employees carry a responsibility also. The department carries a responsibility. We give you everything you ask for. What is your responsibility? What is your responsibility? It's the job. And I think that we have lost communications between the departments and the board. Why, I don't know, because feeling as though the police department was the redhead stepchild. Why? What did we as board members, mayors and commissioners, what did we do for them to come to that conclusion? What? As Commissioner Bridges said, I can't remember a time, Commissioner, you have to correct me, that a request was made. It may not have been granted to the T, but it was acted on. So, in my time. So, A lot of this, I agree with, but a lot, I don't.
Can I ask a question? Quick question. Is the document that you did, digital? Is it a digital document that could be sent out to the people in this room so we could read it?
I have a digital version of it. I have not released a digital version of it. I released paper versions. I believe it's up to Mr. Harold here to make that choice. It's not my choice.
I don't know that it's my choice.
I'm sorry, I was going with the best guess.
Yeah. I think that, it's from a legal standpoint, we can do digital or paper, either way. Digital will do a lot less damage to the forest, but there are people who do like a paper copy. I'm a paper copy person myself. But we could do both as long as the board's okay with it.
It's a public
And I
document.
think from a legal standpoint, there's nothing to prevent it.
Can it go on the website now that it's been released?
Yeah, we could put it on the website as well, now that we've got to this point.
So if you would send me the digital, I would get it on the front page of the website.
Do you want that in Word or PDF?
Prefer PDF.
Okay, any, other comments from commissioners? In terms of,
I'll kind of switch gears here. So there's one section in here that addresses the building. I want to make sure everybody's aware that we are taking steps. I think the last committee meeting, we had authorized Mr. Harold
And that was Tuesday.
I'm sorry, I feel like
It was yesterday.
Yeah, anyway, we are going to get a comprehensive facility study done on every city or entity. So, I'm hoping that comes back and we can start addressing the issues in this section. So I just wanted to say that to make everybody aware.
and I know I heard in an earlier meeting, an issue of mold in the police department. I mean, that to me is just, should be a quick fix. You know, we need to get somebody over there and address that. They should not be working in an environment where there's mold. That's hazardous to, you know, them trying to do their job. It would be hazardous to anyone that visits the police department. So we definitely need to take some quick steps to address. It seemed like I read something about there was a crack in the wall, and that there was mold, and that the toilets weren't working, and that officers had to go to other locations to use the bathroom. I mean, that to me is just amazing commentary. To not be able to drink water in the building, to have to bring bottled water. I mean, you know, that is just amazing to hear. And I would just suggest that those items, like Commissioner Lumpkin mentioned, relative to the building, you know, we need to address that very quickly. This board has already acted from a financial standpoint in terms of our officers' salaries and starting salaries and stuff like that. So that's done for now. But issues like buildings, you know, we can talk about the equipment down the road and try to make sure that in our upcoming budget that we address some of those things. But health safety issues with our officers, that needs to happen yesterday. There should be no issues about mold. There should be no issues about a toilet working, and things like that.
And I seem to recall that we were told that some of that stuff had been fixed.
Right, I remember we had an earlier meeting.
But I'm sure there's issues, I'm not saying everything is fixed, but over, somebody's saying hot water issues fixed, I'm not sure.
It's been repaired. It's been repaired.
Okay.
And didn't cut trees, help them along.
Yes, they did, that was several years ago. But I just want, can I,
What are they?
may I make a comment, please?
Yes, please.
I was recently privy to a 1994 study that was conducted for the structural integrity of the police department in 1994, and it was ignored. For $200,000, that building could have been repaired, which may very well would have helped with our current mold issue and some of the other issues as far as the separation of wall and floor, if it had been taken care of in 1994. I don't know who chose to ignore it during that time frame, but that report is available and it's here in this building if you might like to see it. And if I could say something else, and I think I speak for every department head, and if I'm wrong, Tina, Melissa, Cheryl, Amy, Steve, let me know. I'll speak for my last 3 years since I came back from retirement. When we have an issue or we have a request for equipment, any type of need for all of our departments, we directed those needs to the city manager. And what the city manager chose to do with it was up to the city manager. We were not to report to board members. We were to report to our direct supervisor, which was the city manager. January 28th, 2021, prior to my retirement, this letter was written to the city manager for the board members. If he chose not to give it to the board members, I can't control that. I said, we cannot control it. But we report to the city manager as department heads. Am I incorrect?
We don't vote, whether we buy gas masks or stuff, we do the budget, so.
That's correct.
We need to think about that.
If I could, then if things like that happen, then it is the city manager's fault for it. Doesn't matter who it was or how long ago it was. And the reason why that's the case is under the statute, the North Carolina statute, Oxford, like so many other cities, is a council manager form of government. And the department heads, by law, have to report to the city manager, and I don't know if the department gets your name. And so you have to be careful as to who to hold responsible, and I'm the city manager. You hold the city manager.
Well, none of that was directed at you, Mr.
I'm
Mayor. We
not saying that it
appreciate you
was,
being
I was just,
here.
for the people that are here, to understand what the form of government is, and that it's dictated by state statute, it's not dictated by the board. It's in the charter, and it's state statute. And so, the reason I brought it up is you should hold the city manager responsible.
Go ahead. So, again, my desire is to see us begin to fix the culture. And that culture, it exists, it does exist. Calling for this meeting, I was asked twice not to do it. To make the motion during our last agenda meeting that we have some type of presentation. Now, I understand the thought process potentially behind that. This is a very raw report. This is not an I gotcha. This is a how do we fix it? When I wrote my dear colleague letter to you guys in October, where I addressed our former city manager, it wasn't to shame or upset or try to get pointing out that we have a cultural issue that needs to be addressed. It's looking in the mirror and saying there is a problem and we need to move forward, we need to fix it. I strongly believe that information was likely, or I would say I can almost guarantee information was coming from department heads to our former city manager and managers, probably beyond that never made it to the board. For whatever reason. I'm not saying it was nefarious, I'm not saying there wasn't a reason for those decisions. Not my purview to go back in time and try to assess why something did or did not take place. What I want to be able to see is for us to break that culture, have clear communication. Because Mr. Lumpkin's point, we're not deciding on gas masks, not deciding on individual equipment or individual pay. We are deciding on a budget that the city has to operate under. And each department head is responsible for their segment of the budget, making sure that they can operate within the confines of that budget. If they cannot, they can come back and ask for an appropriation. Right? It's a seemingly simple process. But over time, again, for reasons that I frankly don't care why it happened, it's just, it happened. There are deficiencies along the way, but we can address that. But before we address, or as we address equipment issues and pay issues and so forth, we have to address the culture issues. We have to let department heads be department heads. They have to have that information disseminated to the board if there are needs along the way. If there are, there are. And we could figure it out. That's the purpose.
Well, I think the unfortunate thing is, you know, as I sit here, I'm thinking, you know, the person who would have been filtered that information is not here and can't speak for himself. I mean, we got an interim manager now. Our former city manager finished up a month or two ago. And so, you know, to kind of, I mean, in a sense, put on him that the reason that the police department is in the shape it's in is because we weren't informed of what was going on. Now, you know, and he can't respond to that. And all I'm saying is, you know, when we go through the budget process, we are feeling like the manager is giving us information that he's hearing from the department heads that's helping us make decisions on how much money goes where. And again, the police department has always been a priority during the budget process. We try to provide their equipment they need when we're told that we bought new cars. I know we bought body cams and stuff like, and a whole bunch of police equipment that I was under the impression was what was needed and what we needed to consider in our budget. And the fortunate thing is that with this, the person that we're saying we didn't give us the information is not here. And that, you know, is not a comfortable situation for me because he can't respond to why he did or did not reflect what he was being told by department heads in the budget meeting. I just think I think, you know, I know you want to make it, well, let's just go from here and let's just do what we need to do, take the steps we need to do to straighten out things. That may be true, but I want to know why we get to this point. Because I don't want it to happen again. And we're getting ready to select a new city manager. And I think during the interview process, we've got to make clear to our city manager that we don't want that to happen again. Because, you know, I'd like to be quite frank with you, I wish we had the city manager, the former city manager here, so he could respond to me. Because I think it's to some extent unfair to him, for him to not be here, and for these accusations to be floating around that somehow it's his fault that we are at this position.
On that, you know, kind of what Ron said, you know, it's important to figure out how we got here and how not to get here again. But, you know, you also, I just don't want to play the blame game. And also, you know, need to look at this from, you know, the detail, but also with the 50,000-foot view of, you know, how we move forward and to this, to get to where it is now. And, you know, just improve.
As I have said time to time and being on the board, a lot of the things that we're facing today were neglected prior to our being on the board. So we're having to do a lot of cleanup and catch up. And as the chief stated, that report was in 1994. So apparently it wasn't important to our predecessors, the structure at that time. But it's no need us to sit here and beat that drum. It's where do we go from today? What our former city manager did and did not forward to us, we can't do anything about today. It's where we go forward from today. A lot of things in here we have worked on. You mentioned about the banquet in Creedmoor, Crime Stoppers. I think when I was informed of the date it was a conflict, it wasn't because I did not care to be there to support our police. I think this is the first year I didn't show up, but the date and time. So a lot of times when we're not present, it's not because we're dissing any entity, any department. It's because we do have other things that come up. But that's why I'm here to say, we've got to correct what we can and go forward and not have to get to this again. And
All right, where do we go from here?
I just want to agree with Mayor President. We've learned a lot of lessons. We've still got more to do. We're moving forward. Let's move forward. I understand the chief's frustration about the building. I've got photographs in my phone that I took 5 years ago, cracked walls, mold, and I did bring it to the city manager's attention. I know we don't want to diss him, but I brought it to his attention and nothing was done about it. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating for them, it's frustrating for me. And it's frustrating when we don't know what's going on and all of a sudden all hell breaks loose because, you know, and it is frustrating. So let's move forward.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, my stay here isn't going to be a short stay. Depending on when the new city manager comes on board. I'm here through the end of June. But what I was gonna say, moving forward, we're in the midst of a budgetary process right now. The board has its, a budget committee will be meeting within the next 2 to 3 weeks. We got 2 workshops with the board, April 18th and April 25th. And I think the department heads will agree that we've been addressing what our CIP needs are, our capital improvement plan, and we've been doing it as a group. And so I would like to say to the board members that are here and to the public that's here, this is not something that you just the next meeting say we're going to fix it. This is a budgetary process. And so we're looking to put it in the fiscal year 23-24 budget. And we've got to take time to put that together. And we're looking to have a public hearing in May on the budget and looking to have the budget ordinance adopted in June. And you say, well, June. Well, by the way, this is the middle of March. That's 3 months. So I want to assure the board and the public that we're working to put together a realistic budget that addresses some, if not all, the things that's in the report. And we can also address a timeline for doing things, and we have done that. We talked about, well, we can't do everything at one time. We can't put all the AMI meters in 1 year. Just throwing out an example for public works. So we're going to put together something that moving forward starts to address these things. And I hope that helps people understand that we are taking the right steps.
All right. Can we just go ahead and start with the building issue?
We've already
Let's
started with
just make
building
sure
issues.
there's nothing.
We,
that
fixed
our
all,
officers, they
we
can
we
drink
spent-
water and
we spent how
use
much
the
on
toilet.
fixing the windows, Steve?
I put all brand new windows in the PD, repipe the water system,
Oh,
wrap
okay.
all the HVAC pipes, I mean,
All right.
we're moving along.
The moment I saw those, I said, let's, we need to do that.
Some, that goes to show that some things are ongoing.
Yeah, they are.
Progress is being made, but progress does not come overnight. It does not come overnight. Because in considering the budget, we gotta consider all of our constituents, the city, all the taxpayers, because we've gotta consider all of our department heads. For the last year or so, I know the other departments have gotten the feeling of, they just care about the police. Because that's human instinct. Because very little is being said about recreation or any, it seems like everything is the police. No, it is not. No, it is not. Everything is about all of our employees, all of them.
Commissioner Bridges got people, is there community input on this?
Is there any questions from the audience?
We're gonna be able to engage this?
Yeah, look, if you have a comment, you can make a comment, we look at, if you would like to make a statement, you're welcome to that now, and I'll call on you next, if you wanna say something. All right.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say that, clearly, you know,
Yeah, go ahead and tell us your name.
my name is Michael Muhammad. I live in the city of Oxford. Clearly, this issue, the police department, has been on a long time. It's not new. I think Commissioner Toby, I think he's right. There's been many years we've been talking about this police department issue, and it's going down. Dire conditions. But what seems to be happening right now in this commission is that, you know, it's not just a city manager problem. You know, we say issue city manager, it's a chief police issue too. A failure of leadership with the chief police. It's a failure there, because if you tell your city manager and these things in dire conditions are not happening, you have a responsibility to push forward, to say, look, this is dire, this is community protection. So don't give me that crap about it's the city manager, it's the board's responsibility. It is their responsibility. All of you failed. What I'm saying is, don't give me that. It's doubtful. I didn't follow through. It's out of my court now. I already gave it to the city manager. That's it. No.
And this
That's
is
not,
why
excuse
we're
me,
here today.
that's not management. So what I'm saying is, let's look at, I hope our commissioners can read forward, have their ear to the ground, and be able to look past their department heads and listen to some of the employees of that department, what's going on. That's important, because clearly there's a breakdown of communication between the department head and the city manager and this board. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Muhammad. Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Bridges, I'll be short. I heard a lot in this room.
Your name?
I'm sorry, Janelle Burke Marable. I've heard a lot from the commissioners today, and a lot of it has been disturbing. I do want to say, Commissioner Summy, I really appreciate you taking the risk today to say what you said, because I know it's hard sometimes to be amongst your peers, and you're saying something different than they're saying, and then sometimes that treatment is wrong after you walk out that room from your peers, and I can identify with that. I heard Commissioner Khan, I wish he was here, still here, talk about culture. And I think that we're all seasoned in here, that we're not all young folks. When we talk about a culture shift, we have to, from an auditor standpoint, which I'm sure you can agree, that first we have to identify prioritize the risks that Mr. Dixon has identified by having at least 26 interviews with Oxford PD, and also I believe the HR representative. So before you can create a culture shift, one, you have to build trust, and two, you have to start putting those risks. You have to start lessening the risk, because right now what you've had is you've had risk not only to the well-being, physically and mentally, to your police department, but your citizens of Oxford. And my last thing I want to say is we keep what I have said to Ms. Sullivan next to me. It appears the commissioners are passing the buck. You can clearly see who agrees with what the commissioner is she'll go nod her head when Commissioner Bridges says something and so forth and so on. My concern, is this. You keep talking about the past city manager, the past city manager, the past city manager. You know, it's one band, it's one sound when it comes to this board. You vote yes, or you vote no, whatever passes, passes. So when we talk about the report that was just disclosed today, we have an interim city manager that asked for comments to be redacted from the audit. To say if there's anything derogatory about the commissioners, if there's anything derogatory about the mayor, if there's anything derogatory about myself, to remove that from the audit. And I think Mr. Dixon had took 24 hours or so and never taken on that, did not agree. So when you are having a prior city manager doing that, by not having open transparency, and then you having a report today showing that your current interim city manager is doing the same thing, this is why you have to.
Thank you. We're gonna.
One thing I used to say that I was nodding Commissioner Bridges is because of the history. Some of the things he was saying, here, we heard that. So, no, it was not that I was dictating to which commissioner I am in agreement with. It's like a historical thing, because Commissioner Bridges and I have been on the board longer than I could read you. Or not you, because okay. Watch how I say that. But no, please don't think that it was an historical agreement.
And look, I want to thank everyone for coming to this, again.
Captain Curl has her hand.
Can I make one
Okay.
comment?
Yeah.
It will be brief. As far as what the chief said, that we give our budget to the city manager, we do. However, I have spoke to each and every one of you sitting at that table. Some of you with us together, and we brought attention to what has been brought in this report. So it is not the first time that y'all have heard this. Because y'all have been in office. As a matter of fact, one of you at this table, I sat in tears worried about my officers. An emergency meeting was supposed to be called, and I have not seen them in yet. So we have told y'all what's going on, and we have gave it to our city manager, and we still didn't get it. And we're still working and taking care of these citizens. And our officers are working from 138 to 156 hours in 2 weeks. And we are tired, but we are dedicated to Oxford, not this board, or not this city hall, this building, but we're dedicated to these citizens. I've been here 24 years, and I've never felt like I have this. That's all I gotta say.
Again, I thank all that came to this committee meeting, and at this time, we're gonna adjourn this meeting. Thank you. And I did want to thank, I think I was in the process of thanking Mr. Dixon for his report and for the work. You know, I wanted to make sure that, Cheryl, was able to finish the meeting. So, we want to thank you for the report, and we will, act on it. And, at this time, this meeting is adjourned.
Mr. Dixon, it's nice to